All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. My name is Jennifer Carroll. I'm the Director of Education here at the Historical Society of Cheshire County. I want to welcome you all. I'm going to do a quick introduction and then we're going to turn it over to our panel. In 2018, about 50 professional New Hampshire photographers set to work documenting their state through photographs. People, places, events depicted in thousands of photographs that document 21st century life. Little did anyone know that life in New Hampshire would be altered so drastically in the final year of this project as the pandemic struck. All of this documentary evidence of our lives will be archived in the New Hampshire Historical Society. The exhibit that you see around you tonight captures a small portion of that project. The Historical Society of Cheshire County is one of 8 venues around the state hosting these photographs. You can travel to see them all if you like. In our exhibit, Medora Hebert's photography is featured prominently as one of the most respected and beloved photographers of our region. We have invited her here this evening to talk about her work. For those of you interested, New Hampshire Now coffee table book is also available for purchase, featuring hundreds of the photographs from this 2-year project. Our guest this evening, Howard Mansfield, wrote a beautiful introduction in that book, and we invite you after the program to grab your own copy. And I might mention that today kicks off our annual holiday sale, where the public may enjoy a 10% off in our museum store, and Historical Society members receive 20% off our locally made products, artwork, and publications, including works by all 3 of our guests tonight. So we've invited local author Ernest Hebert to moderate a discussion with Medora and Howard. And our theme, the power of place and the ways in which place can resonate in a photograph and in literature. I want to thank New Hampshire Society of Photographic Artists and the New Hampshire Historical Society for organizing this exhibit project. And I also want to thank New Hampshire Humanities for sponsoring tonight's program. And of course, Keene State College's Office of Ceremonies and Events for collaborating with us on this program. And finally, thank you to our guests this evening for sharing yourselves and your work with all of us. You helped define the Monadnock region, and we're really so proud to have you here this evening. At this point, I'm going to hand things over to Ernie, but let me add that this event is also streaming live on Zoom. So welcome to our guests at home. Any noises that you make this evening will be heard by all of them. So please be aware. So if you want to silence your phones now, that would be a great time to do it. We're also recording this program tonight, which we would like to archive in our collection as an FYI. For all our Zoom participants, I'll be monitoring the chat, so feel free to ask questions in our Q&A box. So when we get to that portion of the evening, I'll feed those questions to them. So I'm going to turn it over to Ernie. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to read a short piece, turn it over to Howard, and then our headliner, Medora, will come on to show slides and talk about probably maybe this book, and about her own world as a photographer. After that, I'd like to have a kind of an open discussion. I don't want to call it a Q&A because there's something deadly about that. But where we can all, you can share our thoughts about this idea of place and its power in our lives. Success in America is really perceived as in the hometown. It's always someplace else. That's a fundamental American value. We're always moving someplace else for supposedly a better life. Businesses, school boards, and local governments usually seek their top people from out of town. Meanwhile, most ambitious local young people instinctively understand that their own success is more likely in some other burg than the one of their origins. As a young man, I felt that need to be successful at something, anything really, to justify my existence. And that something, I surmised, would be far from where I was born, in Elliott Community Hospital in Keene, or where I grew up on Oak Street in Keene, or in schools I attended in Keene, St. Joseph's Elementary School, Keene High School, Keene State College, drove taxi in Keene, worked in Keene factories, pumped gas in Keene, came of age as a reporter for the Keene Sentinel. In other words, I did everything wrong for success. Still, life worked out for me backwards. In 1969, at age 27, and upon graduation from Keene State, I was thinking that success, whatever that might be, would be far away from home. In the late summer of that year, my 19-year-old bride and I lit out for Palo Alto, California, where I had been accepted as a graduate student in the Master's Creative Writing program at Stanford University. I discovered that the San Francisco Bay Area was everything that the Monadnock region was not. It had an ocean, close quarter city life, benign weather, proximity to the grandest trees on the planet, and mountains far more grand than the Grand Monadnock. I tried to love California grandness, but could not. I left Stanford early without an advanced degree. Medora and I decided to move to New Mexico, where during previous road trips I had fallen in love with the landscape, and where one of my closest friends was a graduate student at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. Here I would get a job and Medora would finish her college education. It was a plan that made sense for the head, but not for the heart. Upon arrival in New Mexico, Medora and I found ourselves desperately homesick. It was a familiar feeling for me, and I should have known it would encompass me. I was homesick in Palo Alto, homesick in Menlo Park. In earlier years, I was homesick at Fort Dix and at Fort Bragg when I was in the Army. I was even homesick in the only city I ever loved and still love, New Orleans, where I spent 7 months in 1967. Medora and I left New Mexico after a very short period and drove back to Keene. I was full of doubts until coming into the city on Route 12 when I caught that view of Mount Monadnock. In the sudden and involuntary exhilaration of that moment, I knew we'd done the right thing for us. It was not that Keene and environs were superior to the San Francisco Bay Area or to New Mexico. It was something else. Years later, while I was working as a reporter for the Sentinel, and after I had attended a number of town meetings in the area communities, and after we'd lived in Nelson, West Milan, Swansea, and Keene, it dawned on me where home was, the circulation area of the Keene Sentinel. Brand name, the Monadnock region. Après Sentinel, I worked briefly in Manchester and for more than 25 years in Hanover, teaching at Dartmouth College. Medora and I bought a little house in West Lebanon. It was a great place to raise our daughters, but to me, it never felt like home. Where specifically in the Monadnock region did I want to live? The answer that I permitted myself was vague and not very satisfactory. I wanted to live everywhere. I had these fantasies of building cabins in all these little towns that I love. I wanted to own the region in my heart and in my head. This endless morass of moi all got recombobulated over the years in my fiction. I live in West Milan, shop in Keene, tool around the region, but my true home these days is in the invented town of my novels. Fictional Derby, New Hampshire is a composite of West Milan, Sullivan, and Dublin, with echoes of Alstead, Chesterfield, Marlow, Stoddard, Nelson, Hancock, Harrisville, Swansea, Winchester, Walpole, Fitzwilliam, and of course, Keene, the place of my birth and the place of my burial lot in St. Joseph Cemetery. Based on my own experience growing up in a strong religious home, I believe that a need for a God is a gene. Some people have it, and some people, like me, don't. Perhaps this craving for a place to call home is also a gene. Some people have it, and some people don't. I have it. And I'd like to end with a line from Howard Mansfield's insightful book, Chasing Eden, where he's riffing on the thoughts of a painter. Sing the joys of your place over and over, knowing that you can never get it right. Thank you, Howard.
Great. Thank you, Ernie. I could listen to you all day. And Medora, I'm looking forward to looking at your photos. It's going to be terrific. And it's been interesting to hear comments between these two up here that you can't hear. I want to start to you by reading a short essay from Summer Over Autumn about one small landscape, a chair. And I think you'll see why. And then when I'm done, I want to give you 4 brief thoughts about writing as honestly as possible about place and about New Hampshire. This little essay is called This Old Chair. When you buy an old place with a barn and a shed or two, you often inherit stray bits of the old life, hints about the history of the house you now call your own. Our small house, barn, and chicken shack, a studio that once housed chickens devoted to their own art, came with a small trove of cast-off shutters, old windows, and various hunks of plows, sleds, harnesses, and shoes from the age of the horse and the ox. My favorite cast-off is a Queen Anne-style dining room chair, which I'm sitting in as I write this. Furniture made during Queen Anne's reign at the start of the 18th century is graceful and delicately carved. Its solid self-assurance, says a guide published by the British National Trust, is also shown in that 2/3 of an expensive piece of imported wood could be wasted in making the elegant double-curved cabaret leg. My much later New Hampshire translation of this style is self-assured too, but it is not elegant. It was made by people who knew the heft of a good axe, the feel of a good wooden pail. It was made by workers with a sure sense of practicality. No Yankee is going to waste wood, and he's not going to show off by whittling at the thinness. A chair should be serious about support. It should offer good value. It should be built like a barn. This country edition is like a formal gown made from denim instead of silk. It's more Cousin Anne than Queen Anne. The legs have a hint of a curve, but they are rather fat. They are good legs for farm work. The front legs drop straight at the knee and curve to a wide angle. The fiddle back splat, the central part of the chair back, is hefty. The top rail of the chair overhangs the fiddle back splat and the stiles on the side, so that it looks like a thick oaken deli sandwich. This chair was made in Keene, sometime between World War I and the early years of the Great Depression. A yellow paper label still hanging on under the seat says, Norwood, Calif and Company. The style number is penciled in, 3325. It was probably sold in a set of 4, 6, or even 8 to a striving town merchant or a successful farmer. The Cousin Anne style is a country mouse's reach for the city styles shown in the magazine and movies. Look at us. Everything's up to date here too. My orphan chairs had a hard later life, really one more like barns, which are freely altered for the task in hand. Barns are like workbenches marked by many jobs. The seat was reupholstered in a reddish-brown fake leather. Someone then stood on it to reach a ceiling he or she was painting with a roller. The faux leather is speckled with white paint so that the seat looks like a starry night. The chair back has smudges of white and gray paint, perhaps from one of the artists who used to rent the Chicken Shack studio. But its roughest use came from its short life as a workbench. The fiddleback splat is now only half a splat. One splintered side goes straight down. Several holes have also been drilled in it. This has only brought the chair close to the true character of New Hampshire, a land that is hard used but resilient. This chair is like many mill towns and their abandoned mills. Thousands upon thousands of days of honest labor have passed by without a memorial. This orphan chair is a small marker of an honesty that overwhelmed its fancy English heritage. It aspired to a cityfied elegance, but it has acquired a rougher kind of beauty, like a wrinkled face. Chairs like this are piled up forgotten in attics, barns, and sheds. They slosh around country auctions. They are sold, if at all, in large lots, often at the auction's end, and they move on to other auctions, barns, and attics. They are like the old man of the mountain in its last days, when the great profile was held together with cables and epoxy. Scars, collapse, and renewal are all a part of the New Hampshire landscape. Much of New Hampshire is postcard pretty, but there's much that is rougher. You have to live with it to really see it. It has a kind of grace that's hidden, like a broken, paint-splattered old chair. So that may be the smallest landscape we're going to talk about today. So, briefly, my thoughts about writing about place in 4 movements. 1, no polemics. The writer should have dirt under his or her nails. All good place essays are about close observation, being tourists of the near at hand, looking closely at changes in the land. In this way, we avoid what the national park rangers call windshield visitors, taking quick snapshots of vast places. We should ask, does the essay have dirt under its nails? Is the writer working from a specific place? Is he or she studying this place? The writer should be working the land to examine our perceptions, overturn our expectations, working to see the place as clearly as possible. 2, no city mouse, country mouse cuteness. These words should be forcibly retired. Quaint, career knives corner, white picket villages, happy apple-cheeked children, and nestling. No houses, towns, etc. nestling in the hills. New Hampshire is not some time out-of-mind brigadoon that waits every 4 years for the national media to set up for a shot with the reporter in front of a meeting house or a covered bridge, or a fake bridge. For years, the national media stayed at the Sheridan Wayfarer in Bedford, and you had that fake little footbridge behind them. Kind of suggested it was a covered bridge. New Hampshire's a place where there are layers of time, where many times coexist and swirl together. Think, if you will, of someone sitting in their 1799 farmhouse by the wood stove answering email and streaming movies. The interstate and the dirt road, town meetings, direct democracy, and our general mass malaise don't cancel each other out. The old ways aren't alive because they are entwined with the contemporary. History, just when you think it's gone out the door, stands up and speaks eloquently and right to the point. 3, no place apart. New Hampshire is its own place, and it's also part of a big, complex Boston regional economy. In William Cronin's big book about Chicago, Nature's Metropolis, He talks about growing up in Wisconsin. To his boyhood eyes, Wisconsin was pure, far from the smoky, evil Chicago. He didn't realize that Chicago figured in almost everything he ate and wore, even if we bought it locally. He didn't see that Chicago ruled the countryside, but now he knows that Wisconsin was and is wed to Chicago. New Hampshire has always struggled with big forces, even as it thinks of itself as, quote, a small state that lives large, end quote, in the words of one promotional lord. That slogan accidentally captures New Hampshire's eternal dilemma: how to be a small state in a big republic, how to profit from big corporations and a big federal government and not be drowned. But just how large this small state should live is a question without a neat answer. And therein lies many fights over things like whether to build an oil refinery or the Seabrook nuclear power plant, or if a 4-lane interstate highway should push through Franconia Notch, or if the high voltage transmission towers of Northern Pass should cross the North Country. New Hampshire has drowned before. It has been controlled by corporations larger than the state. Most big schemes are financed by money from elsewhere. Starting in 1845, the Boston Associates, the moneyed elite who built the textile mill cities of Lowell and Lawrence, controlled the water levels of New Hampshire's largest lake, Winnipesaukee, to power the looms almost 100 miles downstream. No one, not one person in New Hampshire had a say about what happened to that lake. At the start of the 20th century, the Boston and Maine Railroad ran the state. The B&M's monopoly stranglehold on New England's railroads made it all powerful. Every candidate for governor in New Hampshire was approved first by the B&M. Every bill set before the legislature was read first or written at the railroad's Concord's offices. The railroad, as it was known, chose state legislatures, congressmen, senators, and the railroad's supposed watchdogs, the railroad commissioners. There was no opposition. Almost every lawyer and newspaper editor in the state was on retainer. It was difficult to find a judge who had not been paid by the railroad. The clock in Representative Hall did not start until the last train deposited the state legislators, who had traveled for free. The railroad, said one legislator, is eternally watching and doing. New Hampshire, said the crusading lawyer Louis Brandeis, has been a state within the Boston and Maine. New Hampshire fights these battles over and over. It is often courting and fighting off big corporations. No part of the state has been untouched. The state sold off 172,000 acres of the White Mountains in 1867 for the meager sum of about $25,000, $6.88 an acre, or about $115 in today's money for virgin forest. The lumber kings clear-cut the mountains in places falling and leaving behind 200-year-old spruces just to make it easier to roll down the largest trees. The barren mountainside slid into the rivers, the slash caught fire, the runoff flooded the Merrimack River, shutting down the mills. The black and white photos of the cut-over and burned mountains remind me of the battlefield photos of Antietam and Gettysburg. The New Hampshire Forestry Commission, powerless to stop the destruction, said, and I quote, "All the mountain forests in New Hampshire are private property, and we have no more control over their owners' treatment of them than we have over the condition of life on the moons of Mars." It took an epic, decades-long reform to create the white national forest that we see today. And all the eastern national forests were born in New Hampshire. So finally, 4. Brings me to my last point. You can't ignore the American quest for placelessness. One part of American history has been a quest for placelessness, a quest to make one place like another place. We may sing of spacious skies and shower praise on family farms and small towns, but we've been hard at work for centuries to level all local distinctions. From the earliest days, Americans have struggled to build a nation, and there's that phrase in the old civics textbooks, to build a nation. It kind of sounds mildew. But this was the project: create one people, create one national market, e pluribus unum, as it says on the greenbacks, out of many, one. Out of many places, one standard place. New cities began by laying out a grid, willfully pushing streets through steep hills, cliffs, and ponds. The hills were leveled to fill the ponds and build land out into the harbor. The uniformity of American cities was remarkable to foreign visitors. Another way to understand the quest for placelessness is to consider American cheese. I was once at a dinner in Paris with expatriate Americans who, over the cheese course, were extolling the virtues of the strong, distinctive local cheeses that one of the guests had procured from a little market in his neighborhood. Why can't we have cheese like this in America, they asked, instead of that awful American cheese? It doesn't even taste like anything. I defended the orange cheese of our childhood. American cheese isn't about taste. It's about uniformity. It's about having the same piece of cheese in Chicago or New York, Duluth or Oakland. Each slice is like the next, no matter where or when you buy it, no matter if it has been shipped thousands of miles in refrigerated railroad cars, trucked through the desert, or bought at the factory store. Everyone gets the same piece of cheese every time. American cheese is a triumph of shipping. The cheese manufacturers, like the railroads, had, as they said in the 19th century, annihilated space. Applied that to hamburgers, hotel rooms, automobiles, books, and you can see why European visitors were disappointed to spend days rattling across a huge country only to find on their arrival in a new city that there was no there. Americans had worked tirelessly to shrink the continent. My point, I should say, was lost among the many empty bottles of wine. You can't tell expats anything. Yes, the French cheeses are extraordinary, but you couldn't ship them over the mountains to Boxmart in Sacramento. So, in conclusion about place, now that I've taken you through a chair and a hunk of cheese, a good essay about a place, is a report from an intersection. The elusive feel of one place exists in that intersection of political and family history, landscape, destiny, expectations, weather, and time. Thank you.
I was one of the 50 photographers who participated in the New Hampshire Now project. And I just need to make a correction. These weren't professional photographers. For the most part, I would say 95% were serious amateurs. And I firmly believe being a serious amateur is the most wonderful state you can be in as a photographer. You just have the pure love of doing it. So that's where most of the folks worked on this project came from. And that's why the result is, I like to think, a gentle look at New Hampshire. I think they wanted to make it very hard-hitting, journalism like Dorothy Lang, but what happened was it was a gentle look at New Hampshire, and that has value, and I'm glad to be part of it. So in addition to shooting for this project over 2 years, just at the end, I happened to take an online course on landscape photography, and for my final project, we had to create an artist's statement, and to me it dovetails so well with the project. And I'd like to read you my statement before we look at the pictures. It says, I look and look with one goal, and that's to see. I want surprises, color, visual pleasure, and above all, connection with the place I live. My subjects are varied: gardens, rivers, animals, vistas, trails in the New Hampshire woods, and people. My experiences with these places and things and people are always enhanced by photography. As a photojournalist, I learned the pleasure of the hunt as a way of understanding the environment of my place. As an aging human being, I want to cherish every bit of my environment, and I want to leave behind a photo legacy that shows the love and appreciation and respect I feel for the place I live. And having said that, I'd like to present some of the outtakes from the program in no particular order, kind of a hodgepodge, and interspersed with some landscape photography. And I'll just talk a little bit briefly about each picture. This is, I did this for the landscape project, and it's the Connecticut River just up north of Walpole. It's in Walpole maybe, and I just think the Connecticut River is just the love of my life. It's just the most marvelous place. Next. Well, and part of my rambles took me to Swansea. There you go. This is the Swansea Old Home Day with a little fellow. Now this is an important picture because this represents a time gone by. For years in Westmoreland, the locals would have coffee there in the morning, and this is gone now. Next slide. This is what we have. And I know it sort of bends one's mind, doesn't it? It's nice, it's very shishy. It hasn't opened yet, it'll open in December. But it kind of spins my head around that this place that we had, that everybody went to, is no more. It's just, yeah, things change, don't they? This is a Westmoreland controlled burn. I love these pictures, with Spofford and Chesterfield and Westmoreland and Walpole and all kinds of different people. Those fire guys, they love that stuff. No, they don't put it up, they just enjoy it. They do exercises inside. And I like this picture because this is Jonathan Daniels' house, and I happened to be there on Halloween Eve, and I just liked seeing this neighborhood represented and the little kids in their costumes. This is Anton Elbers. He was one of the founders, he and his wife and some other ladies, of the Orchard School in Alstead. Or, is it Alstead or is it Ackworth? East Alstead, thank you. And I happened to be there on a blizzard day, and he was with a young man who came to work at the bakery, I believe. But next. What about a yard sale? What is that, New Hampshire? I think this is one of the very first things I took. I thought, this is it. This is where I live. This is, and then I bought something. Next. Oh, these are one of the photos I took for the landscape course. This is a vista in Westmoreland. It looks so different in the early morning. I never get up early, never. And for this course, I did. And I loved it. It was amazing, and I should do it more often. It just makes such a difference. This is a sculptor from Manchester, New Hampshire, who went to Keene State, went to New York City, lived there for 40 years, and now he's home in Westmoreland with his wife, and he has a beautiful studio up on Butterfield Hill Road. Next. And there's the local fellows helping him move in pieces of sculpture he had in his storage place in Marlborough for years and years. And now they're in the barn. I get a kick out of the thunder and lightning there. Okay. What can I say? Christmas lighting in downtown Keene, I'm very sentimental, I'm very emotional. I think that I just love it. Next. I have a real thing about local dumps. It's where people meet. This is no more since the pandemic. This is our swap shack, or the put and take, depending on who you speak to, in Westmoreland. And they closed it during the pandemic, and now it has been resurrected under tighter control. And it's no longer the rollicking place it was, but it's probably better off in its new incarnation. This is the old incarnation. Everybody loved that place. Family at play in Westmoreland. I'm glad the families play together. I found a little girl getting her ears pierced in downtown Keene with her dad. It's the sort of thing. Okay. And these are our scenes from Keene, people expressing their beliefs, and we're glad they do. Next. Oh, well, we had to do it. Working for a newspaper, I learned that anything that made your head swivel around and go, oh my, what is that? That was what you took a picture of, and you know, I'm driving in Westmoreland, oh my God, there's the Easter Bunny. It's the sacred and the profane or something, I don't know, but I had to do it. This is one of the, along the Connecticut River from the landscape series. Just a few. Now, I have mixed emotions about this. I took this vista many years ago of Keene up in Robin Hood, from the same spot up at Robin Hood Park. And this is the one I took recently, of course, and look at those big apartment buildings. I don't know, I don't think I like them. It just doesn't seem like my Keene. Those big giant buildings, they're in the way of everything. But anyway, things change, don't they? Next. This is Evelyn Ball. This is her statue on her grave in the Woodlawn Cemetery. And we're in the Ball Mansion now, as you may or may not know. This is one of Ernie's favorite places just to get out of the house, go for a walk. It's very peaceful, and she looks so pensive, and yeah, it's just a nice place to go. This is a carpenter at work with his son. And in Keene, we had Black Lives Matter protests or support in the summer, and yeah, some parts of the world we are part of. Now, this was early on in the pandemic when we didn't, and at least I didn't know what end was up, what we were doing. And this is one of the first days of shopping at Home Depot. You can see it's raining, maybe you can't see that, but I don't know, when I look back at that picture, I think those were confusing times. We didn't, you know, yeah, okay. This is the Wetlands in Westmoreland, dearly loved for its turtles and wildlife and birds, and it's just a great place to go, take pictures, walk around. Again, dumps. Look at this. Do people know where their recycle goes? This is at the Keene landfill, and things get dumped down. I don't know how these guys do it, but look, they sort and they sort and they sort. All that stuff is what we put in there. This is just a glorious place in Westmoreland called Sheep Rock. And that shaded area on the left is where, according to legend, maybe it's true, the farmers would slide their sheep down into the water to wash them, hence Sheep Rock. But it's even more popular in this time of global warming. Owl in my yard, very happy to see it. And this is from the landscape series, again, in the morning with fog and things I'm not used to seeing, morning light. And it says mandatory face masks within the city. And I think those ladies are carrying their masks, but they're leaving the city, so they're okay, they're cool. But that's our times. I think this was pretty early in the deal, in our situation. Westmoreland, big old pig. This is the, I want to say the community kitchen, and with folks come to get, they have great produce that they give to people there. It's just wonderful things, and yeah, there are some volunteers and some recipients. Little spirit of this 4th of July in Westmoreland with the pet cows of some of the residents. Now, to do this project, I went places I don't usually go. This is the VFW down on Winchester Street. And I thought this is pretty funny. Maybe I'm just live a sheltered life, but this lady, she's the manager, and she's making out the list for the meat auction. What? That is, okay. But they were very nice to me there. I had a good time. Go ahead. Oh, and this gentleman, isn't he wonderful? Look at that. He's got the Marine hat on and the lottery ticket. Yeah. It was kind of an amazing experience to go there. A place that this project wasn't without its, you know, surprises and interesting things. Connecticut River. This is a hatch of dragonflies taken from my kayak. Remember when these were unusual? Well, not in Westmoreland anymore. They are out and about and vigorous. And this is in preparation for a contra dance at the town hall. I know these pictures are Westmoreland centric, but that's where I live. What do you want? Next. And this is the amazing Staples, Wesley Staples, and his pictures in the show along with his sap buckets. He taps it all by hand, or he doesn't use the tubes, and makes it in his barn, old school style with the wood-fired furnace. Sort of amazing. There he is, we'll be at the village store. This is just morning, one of those mornings in Westmoreland on my front yard. And this is the town has a church fair, or they did until it got canceled. And this is one of our selectmen's wives. I can't think of her name, forgive me. Oh, Carroll Austin. Thank you. Just preparing to lay out some things at the yard sale portion. Almost done. More scenes from the morning. Yeah. The wetlands again. Two more, I think. There it is. We put it in there. That's Keene landfill. I could have done a whole series, a whole show on the landfill. It's amazing. At one point when I went there, they had goats. I wasn't, I'm not from Keene. I didn't know about that project. And I missed out getting photos of them, but they were goats grazing on the capped, mounds of previous dump places and dumps. And I love fire trucks, and maybe someday people will look back at this and say, oh yeah, that's what fire trucks looked like back in the day. So, at one point in my life, I worked for a fire truck magazine, and we went all over America to fire truck factories. And now I have to look and see where each fire truck is made, and if I know anything about it. It was really a fun time. And the shelter on a beautiful day. They were, yeah. How can we not have it? That's just so iconic and beautiful. I love the white church. It's part of me. And Mount Monadnock. How could I do this without a picture of the mountain? And the course I took was all about great masses of negative space in the photo, which I probably didn't do enough, but if those little, things weren't there, you could see that there's the mountain and then there's this great sky. So that's all she wrote. That's what I did. Had a lot of fun. It was better than working. And I hope you will enjoy the show and look at the book. Thank you.
So now I'd like to open up to you, if you have anything that you'd like to say, or if you have any questions, or if you just want to make a little speech about your own sense of place. Go ahead. If not, we'll all get in the car and go home.
Stay together.
I've lived many different places in and out of this country, and we've only recently moved to Keene. But we knew this area 53 years ago when we used to hike the Appalachian Trail and hang mongoose and hang out when we were young in college. And we're back here now, and we're truly enjoying it. And Howard, this is mostly directed to you. All my life, having moved to 26 different places, and the first question people ask is, are you military? No, we're not. We move for different times of our lives, and we move for different stages of our lives. The reason we moved here this time, and I'm sure you're all curious, is we're now about an hour away from our two granddaughters and our son and daughter-in-law. But we didn't want to live on top of them, because you know how that is. So we chose Keene. And one of the things that we've done is decide to spend this first year discovering the area, seeing where we would fit in, where the skill sets and backgrounds that we have would be most valued. And I see sitting in the back here one of the people who has really influenced me, and that's Matt. He's taught a class this semester through Call, which is one of the best classes I've taken academically in my entire life. And it was Mount Monadnock, Keene region. And we discussed both your books in the class. And it was a very, very worthwhile class. And Matt, you are here, right? And I think he is, I'm going to put him on the spot, but I think he's going to be doing a 4-week course in January. But I would highly suggest, if they archive it, that people visit it. Since I was the only one in the class who wasn't a native, who hadn't been here, you know, you're not a native unless you're born here, of course, but that applied everywhere we lived. And if you had lived someplace only for 4 years, 7 years, 16 years, you still were not native. And my saying has always been, doors are closed, but walk through them. And Howard, your books have really resonated with me because they have addressed the beauty I have found in every place I've lived, as well as the ugliness in every place I've lived. And so far I can say, living here in Keene, I have experienced very little of the ugliness. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great compliment.
I have a question for all of you, if you don't mind. There are some consultants in our region working with the Arts Council, and there's another group here working with the Regional Chamber of Commerce to help brand the Monadnock region. And it got me thinking, or I was wondering, you know, having families, trying to attract families to move here or work here or as tourists, but it really made me wonder, how much are you all aware of the fact that the work that you do is helping to shape that perception and that brand of this region? Because you're out there.
I didn't hear what you said.
I can't hear you. Howard, that means you have to answer.
Ernie is a known brand consultant. I am not aware of that at all. I mean, I'm actually rather wary of those kind of efforts because you end up with these ads in regional magazines that tries to get everything that everybody that was on the committee into one ad. So you have a ballet dancer doing Swan Lake, the ball bearing factory, a couple eating outdoors next to a bus belching exhaust on them, children petting a goat at a little petting zoo. So that, and then the ad says something about like, come to the Monadnock region, we have industry, we're really close to everything, but we're really far away. We're really about families, but we also have nightlife. And you know, all these ads all across the country, they just look the same. I mean, you just come out and be honest and say, come here in March, it'll be miserable, but you'll be able to catch up on your reading. I mean, something like that, you know. You know, mud season's for real. Or just be honest that it's a beautiful place. It's also a little cranky at times. It's a little slow at times, and these are the good things about it. I don't know, I'm just a little wary of those efforts. So if anyone is here from that, I'm sorry. I just said that. I think we'll go back to Ernie being the brand consultant.
I think the topic is branding The area?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's a really difficult question to answer for any place. You kind of made fun of the whole thing, but actually, if you're from away and you want to come to a place, those selling points are pretty good.
In one hand.
Yeah, yeah.
Use the speaker for those of us that can't hear you.
Use the mic. Use the mic.
Medora, stand up and help me out.
It's translated. She can use the mic or speak.
I can't hear you, Medora.
She would like you to use the mic, speak right to the mic.
Oh, speaking to the mic. Yeah. Yeah. You can say it out loud. They can all hear. There's no point in whispering it.
Yeah, you can. All right.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions?
I can translate. Oh, Dan's.
There's one online. I can try to read it. Yep. So our presenter at this month's ES Colloquium at Antioch, artist muralist Sophie Tuttle, spoke of how spaces can become places through public art. Can you share any examples in your experience of undifferentiated spaces being transformed into remarkable places by any means?
It's public art. Okay. I think public art is an amazing thing, and I think it comes partly through graffiti. Where we spend our winters in New Orleans, you can travel through that city and somehow the graffiti and the wall art transcends. I mean, some of it is vandalism, I suppose, but so much of it is witty and gives character and patina to the neighborhoods. And places like Bellows Falls, where they have giant murals on the wall with some personality that enriches the town. I think that enriches the town immensely. And I think of one building in New Orleans, just really good public art. It's huge image of a little girl with some, I can't even remember what the text was, but it just made the whole feeling of that end of the Bywater neighborhood. So I don't know. I guess what I want to say is I appreciate the intersection of graffiti and public art and the spirit in which a lot of graffiti is made, except for the vandalism stuff, which you know that is. So.
I have a question for Dan Scully. To me, good architecture is public art. It doesn't. What I'm actually thinking of Bellows Falls, which is if you go downtown Bellows Falls, it is spectacular. The buildings, everything about it, and one of my favorite pieces of public art is the school Dan built in Munsonville. My question for you, Dan, is what's the future of architecture in towns in our region? What should it look like?
I was in fact going to ask you, Paul, and picking up on Medora's words, character and patina. As you say, my job is to make place. As an architect, I think I'm doing that. I try to do that, but I really don't think you can do it instantly. It happens over time. The place takes on meaning. And I sort of wanted to hear you talk, or briefly talk about how that character and patina builds up when the place ends up having meaning. And sometimes I can design something that I think I've got a layers of something that people will identify with. but it takes time, and it takes use. And it's, but you're all in the history, and that's, I think it's what, that is the necessary piece to give a place meaning, and become a real place.
Well, I feel like we're in some kind of a doo-wop group here.
No singing aloud.
I think what you just said, Dan, is a key point in that. It can't happen instantly. It has to happen over time. I think where a lot of public art fails and some buildings fail is it tries to just fill every nook and cranny, every space with art, capital A art. And there's no room for people to enter, there's no room for the space to evolve, no room for people to take possession of it themselves. The boldest thing, one of the boldest things I've seen ever in Keene was the Railroad School Square project you guys did. And now I got this right, there's this oval space, right? And it's blank. And you didn't put anything in there. And the wall is facing this blank. And you said, okay, we're gonna step back and people can bring their own meaning to this. People can create this space. We're not gonna design it for them. And that, for an architect, is really gutsy. And what happens too often with architecture and with planning committees and with public art commissions is everybody tries to fill every last little piece of space with a piece of art and then a fountain and cobblestones and cast iron and this and that. And it just becomes contrived. And if you look at the spaces that we really love, they have evolved over time, and they've often tied to a very almost rude practicality and almost a parsimoniousness around here about getting some kind of job done. And over time, you come to see the grace in that. That would be my answer.
Well, I disagree with you a little bit in terms of your compliment to me. Because I think that all the space, which is one of the things I had in my mind when I was thinking of this comment, I think it's a bit of a failure.
Why is that?
Because, you know, I thought I was Richard Serra and doing this abstract sweeping shapes. And I had a suggestive stage. Doesn't have to be a stage, a troubadour could come in with his guitar and maybe he would set up grass in front of him. Or a band would come and be there. Not much of that happened.
But isn't it too early to call it, Dan? I mean, you can't. How old is that space? It's too soon.
But with the addition to the co-op, had more facilities built into it, a little lighting for stage and stuff like that. That helped. But the curious thing, everybody wants to be on Railroad Square, which you can see.
Okay.
Right? You can see people and be seen.
Yeah.
And that oval
Too isolated?
sort of removed.
Yeah. Okay.
And you can be out there with your car, but nobody will see you.
That'd be a good thing.
Can I interrupt for a second? We have,
Do you mind to just kind of summarize
yes.
for the audience that can't hear?
Summarize what Dan?
Into the mic.
Okay, here's a summary of what Dan Scully, architect practicing in Keene all these years, just said. I had moments ago complimented his design for Railroad Square, which had this oval space that was blank, saying that was a bold move. He agrees. He replied off mic, saying, and if I have this right, he had to disagree because he regarded that space as a failure because no troubadours had come along. And thinking about it, he came to see that Railroad Square, that little square right off Main Street, was a real area because it had crowding and it had people crossing and coming and going. Is that fair?
Fair.
Okay.
Thank you, sorry.
It's all right. Any other questions? 1 minute left. Yeah, yes.
But I opened the things that they've done is they're
So,
You'll just summarize.
I will summarize.
Nancy, take your mask off, we'll understand.
Yeah,
We have papal dispensation, take your mask off.
yeah, take this.
But when they came in for the,
The Waldorfs.
and that is still a very, very fun thing to walk around and have kids, and it teaches you a little bit about history.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So Nancy points out the Waldorf's Mural project here in Keene,
Yeah.
which is historical and also kind of whimsical at the same time as a good example
It
of
really
public art.
adds a lot to the city, I think. Wonderful addition. It's so classic, so beautifully done, accurate.
Just like the mic.
Oh, they heard me, Jesus.
They heard it.
Anything else?
Anybody else want to have anything to say?
Yeah, I moved here a while ago, and a lot of us have been here throughout our whole lives, or a good while. And I remember I moved here and like, oh, I'm in the Monadnock region. And I drive around, trying to go from Parisville to Hancock and get to the. But after we lived here a long time, every single one of the towns in this region has its own character and demeanor.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have the same thought to any of those towns, any of that, just visceral vibration. I'm always amazed by that.
So do you want me to summarize that?
Please.
Top of the
It's true.
what the fellow in the back said, he moved here a number of years ago and has been really impressed by how each different town has its own character and its own feeling. And I had the same feeling. I wrote a book called In the Memory House, which was published in 1993, and it had a chapter about town meeting. And to write that chapter, I think I went to a dozen or 15 town meetings inside of 2 weeks. Each town was different. It was like walking in on a different family. And some families were not going along too well. And in some families, everybody really liked each other. And in some families, people were kind of wary of each other. But each town meeting was like a family discussion. And each of these towns does have its own feeling and its own sense of who they think they are and what's going on and what they think is valuable. I agree with you there.
Yeah, I think you hit the really important part of the towns, which is that town meeting is the heart and soul of New England small town life. And all you have to do is move somewhere else or live somewhere else and realize that they don't have real town meetings, where the county controls everything. I think the downside of towns are, I think we mentioned earlier, we have high energy prices because we don't want high tension wires and we don't want pipes going through our town. So that's the price you pay for local autonomy. And I think a perfect example of the power of one town would be how the town of Dublin pretty much put a stop to interstate highway or four-lane highway going from Boston to Albany, going right through downtown Keene. If that highway had been built, the identity of this entire area would be different than it is now. It was highways that changed Vermont from being a small rural farm Republican state to a hippy-dippy Democrat state. All the liberals in New York moved up to Vermont, and the conservatives of Massachusetts who didn't like the liberals moved into eastern New Hampshire coming up 93. So I think highways make a huge difference. So I think probably the most important person in your town would be the road agent.
Make that road agent a pie.
Disagreeing tonight.
He's disagreeing. Go on.
I just have to say, I was a Carroll selectman who fought over the highway. And You said Dublin stopped, but I don't know, Harrisville stopped.
Harrisville, yeah.
So, okay, to recap, what was a 15-year pitch battle with New Hampshire DOT and Dublin and Harrisville fighting over where to put the so-called 101 bypass. And Dan Scully wants to point out that it was Harrisville that stopped it. Dublin is still upset about it, and I think we should move on. We'll be here all night recounting that. If you ever saw the map towards the end that DOT had, they had routes everywhere. It almost looked like it had varicose veins. It was just like everywhere. They tried to put that road everywhere, and they finally got so fed up that they went and built up Route 9. Spent all their money on making Route 9 the east-west route in the state. I just want to say one thing about town meeting. You can really tell if a town is working well if there's a lot of chatter and talk when you go to the town meeting, and in between votes and ballots, and people are up and everybody's visiting. There's a lot of visiting in the room. That town is working. If people, other than the guys in the back, the folded arm guys, not gonna get one past me. Other than those guys.
I think too, the personality of the, I think they can hear me without that. I see, for posterity. I think the personality of the moderator
Matters a lot.
matters hugely in the identity of a town. So individuals can make a difference to the town. And in a town like Keene, I think individuals, corporate leaders have made a huge difference in the identity of Keene over the decades.
Way in the back, yes, sir. Matt?
Hi, thank you so much so far, it's wonderful.
So far.
If you take as a premise that when a region evolves or develops, whether culturally or economically, you take as a premise that when that goes well, it's often because it's based on some kind of historical foundation of integrity. Since you know the history so well, what's the next step for the region or for a part of the region that you would like to see that you think would be most fruitful based on the earliest history?
Okay, recapping. When things go well in a region, it's because it's working from a good foundation historically. So what would be the next stage historically, or for the region to go?
What would you like to see in the region based on what you know about what's really?
What would we like to see in the region?
Yeah, what would you like to see happen?
Do
Next. What's next?
Ernie, Medora?
Well, I want to see even more farming and growing and independent businesses, handmade things, arts, crafts. I mean, I wanted it to be non-corporate, let's say that. That's what I really want, and I think everyone should buy local, and I think gardening is one of the most subversive things you can do, and it's wonderful. And I want to see more of that, more gardens. I always wasn't happy.
I'd like to see a decline in population. I'd like to see some of the roads dug up, made into dirt. I'd like to see just a kind of a gradual communal semi-poverty take over everything.
Ernie wants to be your next road agent.
I would do it.
That would do it.
And if I was the road agent, I could erect this whole county.
If I could give you a brief answer, I would like to see the region and the various towns have faith in themselves that they do have something distinctive and not cower before outside influence or outside ideas. In other words, don't be afraid to be provincial. That's what I would say. Question?
Well, I'll give you a counter to that. Tom Bodett, most of you probably know that name, lives in Dummerston, Vermont, and he's a friend of mine from way back, and he was a selectman in Dummerston for a while, and of course he's from Alaska originally. He said that, because one thing that drove him crazy, it was everybody saying, well, that's not how we did it last year, or that's not how we did it 10 years ago. He wanted to bring new ideas, and the town rejected his new ideas. So I think that's probably in keeping with what you said. But on the other hand, we probably need some new ideas. Anybody got a new idea?
Lower taxes.
Lower taxes.
One of the things that you've all mentioned is how change is inevitable, and in the decades that I've lived here, one of the things that I think we're losing as we lose sort of a sense of community is a local newspaper. And the Keene Sentinel, as many small town newspapers now are, is struggling enormously. And I know, Ernie, you started your career there, you mentioned, and it is the circulation area of the Keene Sentinel. And I think that was one of the things that felt like was bringing us all together when we first landed here.
Yeah, I think newspapers have changed so much, that has declined so much, that they've changed the whole identity of the country. You know, my dad, who only had 6, 7, or 8 years of education, he was never quite sure how far he went to school. Every night, read one thing. He read the paper. And he read one magazine, American Legion magazine. That was it. And now that same, you know, the equivalent to my dad is getting his news on television. So in a way, I think that maybe a lot of our identity is slipping away. We don't shop at local stores. We shop online. We don't shop at the local hardware store. We shop at Home Depot. So anyway, I think that's a real issue. I think towns. I think Facebook has in some ways taken the role of the newspaper. Like our town has a Facebook page, so if you want to get across something, you can put it on there. So I think that new institutions will crop up and maybe transform the concept of the paper. But also, I got to say that when I was a reporter for the Sentinel, a lot of people complained about the papers. It's not like everybody was said, "Oh, that great Keene Sentinel." You know, it was you were open season.
One of the best.
By the way, this is hunting season, so I suggest that you make sure you wear don't wear a white mask, because it might look like a deer tail.
One of the best sections in the Keene Sentinel is the week or two around town meetings, when there are little blurbs about
the towns,
road agent elections and.
Yeah, I went to a zillion town meetings when I was a reporter. Helped create my fictional town. So my solution to all this is I live in La La Land. I created my own imaginary society. So. I think that's it. Any other questions? Oh, okay.
I speak for the Sentinel. I love it. I like it because it's about this area. It's not everything coming in on television or from, and I read it every day.
A vote for the Sentinel.
Every day I'm seeing it, so I'm happy with it.
Yeah, the problem is the economic model for newspapers has collapsed. It was really based on classified advertising. That inch by inch was the most profitable part of the paper. That's gone. Newspapers need a new economic model. Some papers around the country are finding it. And hopefully the Sentinel will find its way. There's a lot of promising experiments all around the country right now that are getting that local reporting and those town reporters and those beats coming back.
I think one thing that the Sentinel has done that has made it a better paper than it was when I was working for it is the obituaries. You know, when I was a reporter, we used to write obituaries according to a format. In fact, the newest person on the staff would always write the obits to get it right. In fact, we had one new reporter covering his first Catholic obituary, and instead of writing a mass of Christian burial, he wrote a massive Christian burial. Which was probably true in 15 AD, right? But anyway, now you can submit an obituary. You pay for it, but you do. And I did that the other day, and it was very satisfying. My friend Dennis Patno, that I grew up with, passed away in California, and all of his people are in California. His kids are in California, his wife, and everybody in California. And only a few people really remember him. But I remembered him, and so I gathered the information and created an obituary. It cost me $131, but it was well worth it to do that. You mentioned classified ads. Actually, obituaries have almost always been the most read part of a small town newspapers. And if you want to read some great obits and some lame obits, read the Sentinel every day. It's entertaining. Oh, one more question.
Even in, I'll stand and yell. I haven't been able to hear a lot of these folks over there. But even in listening about the discussion about obituaries in the Keene Sentinel brings me to the point that I've heard many people say that they like to live in the Monadnock region because of the people. And it's really the power of the people. It's the photographers, it's the writers, and it is, of course, the place. The thing that I've been around here since 1980, and what I like best about Keene is the wide road and the beautiful job the city is doing with all of the planting and the trees and the right down Main Street. And thank you guys very much.
So summarizing our last question, a vote for Keene, a vote for its wide Main Street, and a statement that it's really the different kinds of people you have in the region that really make it. Is that a fair summary? Is that it? Yeah. So that's it. Thank you for coming out tonight.